Are we going to get started? Hello, hello. Welcome to Mimi. Thanks for coming. There's something really exciting happening, which is we got a new graphic on our chair slides after like how many years? What can I say? We had to make progress on something. This is the note well. Hopefully you've seen it already this week, but I know some people are only here for the day. All IETF policies are in effect for this meeting, and that includes our IPR policies. So think about what you're contributing, as well as privacy policies and other policies that we have here at the IETF. This is the new note really well. Hopefully you've seen this as well. All of our meetings are governed by our anti-harassment policy, and if you have concerns about conduct or behavior, please feel free to see the Ombuds team. We need a note taker. Would somebody be willing to take notes? And we will sit here until we have a note taker. Just one. It's not that hard. Someone getting voluntold over there? No. Okay. Sorry, who is it? Nick. Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate it. Yes, and reminder to join the Meeteco if you're not already in there. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with a three-part from Rowan on content format, protocol, and room policy. And then I think we'll probably fit in there a little sidebar from Timo on content as well. And then Eric is joining us remotely to talk about his malicious hubs draft. And then we'll come back around on AV metadata. Would anyone like to bash the agenda beyond the Timo addendum? Okay. Rowan, you're up.
Wow, they put it way over here. I think it can still see me from here. Makes me feel a little less further away. Okay, I'm going to talk about Mimi content, Mimi protocol, Mimi room policy. Richard Barnes said, he's like, oh, did you realize that the first three letters of the content protocol and room policy is CPR for cardiopulmonary resuscitation? So we've been a little bit moribund in terms of comments and contributions other than me and Timo. So it'd be great to get a little more energy on this, but let's take this for a spin. What am I aiming at? That thing?
No idea, possibly. Does it work? No. Okay, I'll advance them.
Did you hand control to the slide?
Oh,
Slide bot?
how do I do that? Oh, someone else did it. Okay.
Slide clicker. Okay.
Apparently anyone can do it.
Okay. So on Mimi content, so what changes have we had? So the biggest change is that I felt like we had a pretty stable, well commented on format for the core Mimi content, application / Mimi content. But then we also have this other part, this message status, application / Mimi message status, which is for things like read receipts and delivery notifications, and you could potentially use it in a group for just yourself to say to your other clients that messages were read or that they were deleted or whatever. So what I said at IETF 122 in Bangkok, I said, no, this isn't really of the same maturity. So I proposed to split it. Nobody objected, but nobody said, sure. So I went ahead and did it. Is everybody okay with this as 2 separate documents? Okay, I've got a whopping two hands. Great, no objections. Rough consensus. There were a few small bugs. Somebody who had a very anonymous sounding GitHub ID, BitBlitter, I think, found a bug in the, I just used the wrong extension key name in one of the examples. Sent me a nice PR, fixed that. I fixed a construction in the message ID, and then Felix Linker, who's probably in formal models right now, is he read through and he asked a bunch of questions like, oh, this salt, it looks like it's 16 octets here and it's a variable length here and whatever. And it's like, no, the salt is, thank you very much. I'm glad you gave me that feedback. The salt is always 16 octets. Here we go, boom, done. And then of course I regenerated all the examples, and I'm getting faster at that. We currently have 6 open issues. I already mentioned the issue number 62, so we'll be able to close that right after this. Number 59, it was to do with how do you solve this problem of being able to get metadata for attachments, particularly for images, videos, and audio clips. And so I just went and wrote a quick draft for this, and I'm going to talk about that at the very end of the meeting. Let's see, I have slides for 60, 61, and 67. I'm going to talk about the registry of dispositions. So right now we have a fixed list of dispositions. I think we should have an IANA registry unless anyone objects and says there's a good reason we shouldn't do that, or we should actually use another draft. We should use the existing registry. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a new registry, which is dispositions that are relevant for Mimi. The existing document just has disposition names and disposition parameters that are intended to be used in a content disposition header field. And there are no numerical values, and we use numerical values because we're using CBOR. So I think it makes more sense. And there's a lot of stuff in there that isn't really relevant to a Mimi message. So I'm planning to do that. Does anyone have any comment or objection to me doing that?
We talked at the last IETF meeting in Bangkok that there was this issue of the Mimi content nesting, and I think there was not full consensus on how we should do nesting. I wrote one proposal, but the issue was closed because there was not much activity on it, and there were some complaints. And I prepared some slides about it, so we can talk about it in more detail.
Okay. Well, we had a concrete proposal We had a lot of comments about why there were problems with the concrete proposal. We had what's in the draft, and in the absence of another improved concrete proposal, we have a concrete proposal which works, which has been implemented. It might be a little more complicated than we would ideally like, but we need something concrete, a concrete proposal to move to, in the absence of like an actual bug. All right, so number 60, inconsistent timestamps. So this was from Timo. So currently we have in the Mimi message status draft and in the Mimi protocol, we use the hub accepted timestamp, which is a number, by default, a number of milliseconds since the start of the Unix epoch. And we also have the ability to extend this if Mimi protocol adds a different way of expressing this. We can use more granular time by using the CBOR time tag. Meanwhile, in Mimi content, like what's left of Mimi content only has one time field, which is used for expiration, which is currently a 32-bit unsigned integer in seconds since the start of the Unix epoch. That field will wrap in the year 2106. Personally, I sincerely hope that we have a new version of the Mimi content draft or a replacement of it by that time. If we don't, well, I'll be long gone. So it'll be somebody else's problem. But we could do one of four things. We could do nothing. We could extend it to a UINT 8, keep it in seconds. We could put it in as a UINT 8 and put it in milliseconds, which is a little bit awkward. Or we could try to make it consistent with hub timestamp by adding all the CBOR time tag thing, which I think would be a very bad idea. My proposal is to do nothing. Would someone like to speak for another proposal?
Hello, Timo Kösters from Phoenix AMD. The reason I opened this proposal or this issue is that we have a different expiry for message expiry, but this issue is about attachment expiry. So the expiry in the external part component. And that's has a different format than the expiry for messages, which is why I opened this issue.
Oh, that it's a UINT, it's still seconds since the epoch, right?
I think one is milliseconds, other seconds.
I don't think it's a milliseconds. I think it is also seconds. Would someone like to check that in the background? We can come back to this after another couple slides. Anybody on this? Anybody doing the research? Marvin, maybe? Thanks. Okay. All right, so we had another issue related to message ID calculation. So currently, the message ID calculation is done by having a hash of the sender URI concatenated with the room URI, concatenated with the message, concatenated with the salt. And there was some concern that because of this method of concatenating variable length items, that you could potentially end up with two different, very different messages or two different message senders or rooms that end up with the same message URI. This seems very unlikely. It is still possible. But because the salt is fixed length, we can't change this boundary. Because the message always starts with hex 87, that's not a legal character in a room URI, so I don't think we can have it there. And then that leaves us with the sender URI and the room URI having two different pairs that concatenate to the same value. So this would allow, this would require a very high level of freedom in terms of what you could name a sender and what you could name a room, so that you could name them in such a way that you had in at least one of them Mimi : / in at the tail end of the sender URI name, or at the tail end of the room URI name. So, in the spirit of doctor, it hurts when I do that. My option number one is document this and say, don't do that. The option number one is to just warn for the possibility of an attack, and just tell them, go validate your sender in Room URIs and go figure that out. But beware that, if you don't, this is what could happen. The second is that we could disallow, putting things like schemes that looks like schemes in the path part of a sender URI or a Room URI. We haven't so far put requirements on what goes into such a URI, but we could easily do this. But these are currently legal characters. I could construct a case where this occurred. Third option would be for us to add a separator, which isn't legal in URIs. For example, a pipe character between the sender URI and the Room URI. And finally, we could frame the whole hash input with something like CBOR or TLSPL. We currently don't have TLSPL in Mimi content. Message IDs are also used in message franking in Mimi protocol, and Mimi protocol doesn't have any need to use CBOR. It's not very big, but still, this doesn't seem like an optimal outcome either. Anybody want to give any opinion on this?
Konrad Coburg, Phoenix R&D. Mimi doesn't have CBOR in it, but there's going to be a dependency on Mimi content anyway. So I guess it would be easy enough to, whatever component exposes Mimi content, to provide a hash function, which then internally does the CBOR stuff. So I'm a proponent of the last one because it seems like the easiest to get right or the hardest to get wrong, as opposed to warning and validating and checking. Just frame it and be done with it.
Okay, so it would mean adding CBOR to Mimi protocol, or to the franking, the part that does franking, or bit banging 2 lengths, a type and 2 lengths at the beginning of the.
Don't we have dependencies between the drafts anyway?
There is no requirement that would cause a Mimi protocol, for example, a hub, to have to implement CBOR currently.
Okay, fair enough. In that case, I'd still add the CBOR dependency. Like if you wanted to really minimize it, you don't have to pull in the whole CBOR stuff, but just do some of the logic that's required to actually frame this one little bit of input. But yeah, it's just my opinion.
Anybody else want to speak to this?
Hi, David Waite. I'm actually presenting in the Jose room next. We had a somewhat similar problem where we needed to do an internal calculation, and we did frame it with CBOR, but we did a binary construction. So we didn't expose, there's an aside that it's CBOR, but we're doing things like we have a length prefix at 64-bit so that it's a binary operation to generate that, and that removes the CBOR requirement on implementers, even though we got niceties from actually having it be valid CBOR.
Could when you get a chance, could you please post that into the list or into the chat?
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right.
Tim's in the queue.
Thanks, Alyssa. I just wanted to repeat a question from Deirdre in the chat, which is, why is the hash algorithm encoded in the ID? Can it not be done out of band? And she points out that the hash algorithm can be stripped off of the front of the message ID.
Right. The reason for the hash algorithm is is so that we, in the future, if we deprecate SHA-256, that we could generate new message IDs, but that if you had in your history, for example, you would still be able to correctly calculate the message ID for older messages that used SHA-256, and you would be able to sort of validate that they were before a particular date or flag day or something like that. Deirdre, does that answer your question?
Deirdre, do you have a
Okey-dokey.
mic? Would you mind coming to the mic?
Hi. I'm trying to get in the queue, if you can hear me. This seems like something that should be included in versioning, and that would be the way to handle it out of band. It doesn't, like, I understand that you might have something you want to rotate the hash algorithm, but it still seems something that should be included in versioning of, the scheme or the protocol, because even if you would like to be able to reconfirm IDs from the past, it's still vulnerable to someone can strip off the hash algorithm, replace it with whichever one they want, and do something funny shenanigans with that hash output and so on and so forth.
Okay, I will take an aside here to discuss this briefly, but so in order for someone to do shenanigans, they would have to have a hash algorithm which was approved for making message IDs. So starting from, we certainly would not allow today, an implementation would not allow a weaker hash algorithm than SHA-56 because we would have no reason to define one that was weaker. We would also have a sort of a date at which we said, all right, this particular algorithm, we're going to start recommending, we're going to start using. There would be presumably some transition period, but there's a fairly simple change to make, and we would be able to very tightly scope at what point someone would sort of stop using these messages. The reason that this isn't really appropriate for versioning is because this is going to be in a large corpus of messages that are history. And so history, I had, on my client at Wire, I had 3 years of history. I had, on Skype, I had 5 years of history. Right? On WhatsApp, I have 6-7 years of history. It's not something that I'm going to be able to negotiate what version I use or what hash algorithm I use in order to be able to read my history. My history just exists as a fact. There's not like I couldn't do something about it.
This does feel like something that should not be encoded where anyone can manipulate it and strip it on the fly. It should be encoded somewhere else. It doesn't need to be part of an on-the-fly version negotiation, but it shouldn't be here.
Well, so how would you solve the problem of history? Because that's the requirement. So
encode it somewhere in the protocol spec with the version or whatever the version.
The message history does not contain the protocol.
Or whatever, some specification, wherever you're writing this down. This should not be fully controllable by whoever is able to look at this public information. It should be written down somewhere else. This is being, quote, negotiated here in band, which seems vulnerable.
And even with policy, even where you have, you can have a policy that says you will use this message ID algorithm.
Yeah, even with quote policy, it's still sitting out there to be manipulated.
Conrad?
I mean, we're not really describing or specifying how you would keep a history, right? So, or what format your history would have. So what you could do is when you get a message that's encoded with a certain version or a MIMI version or something, you can still, in the database, wherever you store your messages, you can still store the hash algorithm. It would just not be part of the message ID on the wire. Is that what you mean, Deirdre?
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will work on some text. I'll reach out to you, Deirdre, if I have any questions.
In case we want to support multiple versions at the same time, wouldn't it make sense to save the version in the MIMI content as a top-level field? Like the first top-level field in MIMI content, alongside if it's an edit or replaces something, you have a version, just in U8.
So I've personally been burned by this before, and the this was a discussion early that we wanted to make the base fields fixed for a variety of reasons. So the fact that it always is an array of 7 items. There is an extensions field. So you can use the extensions field. We could put something in there. We could put a version in there, but the those original fields, they should be pretty fixed.
Then how about a field that's just for the hashing version? What hashing version you use? Not the whole content format version, but just what hash version you use. And it should be the same number as you use in the message ID calculation.
You mean, if you wanted to generate a new message ID, so you're saying that you would want to use to have a hash algorithm both in the message ID hash output and inside of the extensions, or that you would want to do as Deirdre proposed, where the hash algorithm is just 32 octets of a hash, and that the algorithm for defining how you put that together is you get from some field that's in the extension setter.
Yeah, I think a top level field for the hash version, and then just have the hash itself as the message ID.
Okay, you said top level, but is something in the extensions map, is that acceptable?
Well, is it an extension or is it a core part of the algorithm?
I think it's an extension if you want to change it, because we have a default.
Wilhelm Baker, if all you want to do is to have a fixed length for a hash, just use the OID. Every crypto library has the OID available somewhere, and the OIDs are self-describing lengths. So no need to invent any more mechanism.
That's not the problem here. The problem, so we already have a hash algorithm that has a known length for a known type and length. The length of the rest of the message ID is always 31 octets. So we're not like, there's not any ambiguity about how to form the message ID. It's whether there's some type of bid down that's possible by replacing the front of the hash algorithm that still somehow matches the rest of the message ID, which frankly seems rather unlikely, but sure. Yeah, I mean, that's why we would want to be able to have hash agility in the future. Okay, who else do we have?
Tom.
Hi, I might be missing something slightly here, but I'm struggling to see what we would gain from moving the hash algorithm to being written down somewhere kind of real close to the rest of the message ID, because wouldn't any putative attacker have the same capability to futz with that, even if it was just real close by? And also, in my experience, real close can become separated pretty quickly, and then you might end up with a hash with an unknown algorithm and someone doing something horrible like, hey, let's try all the hash algorithms and see which one works. So for me, I'm pro current thing.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of defend a bit what Deirdre said, what people have been talking about is to put some field inside of the message somewhere. I said, if we're going to put it in the message, let's put it in the extensions map. The extension map is part of the message, which is part of the input to the hash algorithm. So you would have to have a birthday attack on the hash algorithm in order to succeed. Okay.
Will. Yeah, go ahead.
Will up. Do you actually need to generate the hash algorithm again, or is it just for comparison's sake later on to know which message it was?
When you generate a message, there should be exactly one message ID using exactly one hash algorithm.
But if you never need to generate it again, then you don't really need to know what the hashing algorithm was, as long as it's unique.
If you get a message, you want to be able to compare it again to a message ID that you got somewhere else. So example, let's say that I received some messages, and then someone sends me some history, and there's a message that is a reaction or a reply to a previous message that I was not privy to.
Yeah.
Then when I look at the history, I need to calculate the message ID of the messages that I received, and then lo and behold, I can see, this message was in the in reply to field of a later message.
So your message history isn't already going to include the calculated hash. You have to calculate it again to find out what it was.
If you, if you trust that someone sends you the message ID correctly, yeah, but I mean, it would be a reasonable thing to go and recalculate, to go calculate message IDs on messages that you received. And if you receive them without a message ID, you should be able to do that.
So it's a sort of validation mechanism as well.
It seems prudent to at least allow for the possibility that if someone gets a message, that they can figure out what message ID, what its message ID is on reception.
Okay. I thought it would probably make sense just to have the message ID sent with it. But if there's a reason why it wouldn't, then that obviously would lead to you then having to recalculate it. But if you didn't have to recalculate it, you wouldn't need to know which hashing algorithm it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you received this history and you didn't validate it, then someone could potentially substitute it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So you're going to talk to Deirdre.
Yeah.
About that issue, and then can we come back to that original question here? Because I don't know that we resolved.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like we're going to end up with a proposal where we put a hash algorithm in the Mimi extensions field, and then the message ID is merely the hash output and not, or the hash output truncated to 32 octets instead of having the initial hash alg, which I have to say is extremely nice for debugging purposes, but does reduce one octet of entropy.
Sorry to restart the discussion essentially from the beginning, but that's not what Deirdre said in the beginning, right? So that's exactly the opposite. Like, we don't want to include it in the Mimi content. The hash function should be clear from the context in which the message is
The
sent.
message is the context. It's the only context, because we're not saying that we can use Mimi content outside of Mimi protocol. So this is the context. That's the only context we have.
I do think what Rohan just said is better. So
Okay, sorry if I've been misrepresenting this. My bad.
Okay. All right. So going back, Marvin, did you check out the timestamps? Okay, so they're both a UINT 4. They're 32-bit. 32 bits of 2 to the 32 seconds since the start of the Unix epoch. Can we leave this one alone? Can we leave it as is? Going. Gone. Great. Okay. One thing closed.
Not that many.
All right. We got in terms of replying to messages that have replying or reacting to messages that have been edited. Presumably, if they're deleted, we don't care. Timo asked the question, what message ID do you put in reply to? I'm paraphrasing here. Please speak up if I'm misspeaking. What message ID do you put in reply to for reply or reaction when a message has been edited, possibly multiple times? So I could have had, original message, then I edited it, then somebody replied, then I edited it again, then maybe somebody even deleted it, right? Likewise, somebody could react. I could have different reactions to different versions of the message. So I think for me, it was pretty straightforward that we want the message ID of the version of the message to which you actually replied or reacted is the one that is in the message, that the reply or reaction message. There may be other things you could do, but I thought that this was like fairly clear semantics. Do we need to add additional text or guidance about this? I could add another sentence or two. Anybody have a problem with this complicating or anything like that? I'm happy to do this, but
How do existing systems deal with this today?
I mean, I know of one implementation that does what I said.
Okay.
If Marvin, did you do this? Did you deal with this issue?
I did not actually. I mean, I'm not sure what I implement. I think I implemented the same that XMPP does, which is to always use the first message
Mhm.
ID. So if you have an edit, then it would still be the first message. So I think for some implementations, it might make things easier because it means that in your local state, you will always, an edit will not change the ID of a message. It will just change the content. So that might make it easier for some implementations. But the other, I mean, I also think this version is fair. It just needs to be defined.
Okay.
Yeah, in our implementation, we started with Marvin's approach too. And then after I saw the comment, I moved it to your approach and it was fine. I'm okay with both ways.
Okay, so I can add some text for that. Okay, so it sounds like going back to the list here. So it sounds like people are okay with splitting the AV metadata we'll talk about later, but it sounds like we can close the issue. The timestamp format, we're going to leave it as is. The message ID, I'm going to propose something with Deirdre. Delivery status, sounds like everybody's okay with moving that to a separate spec. People are okay with a registry, and I'll add some text for message ID interaction to edits. So it sounds like if we get this one issue resolved quickly, I'm asking very much for us to please start I will resubmit a new version of this as soon as I can, and to please start a working group last call. Does that sound good, please, everybody? I would really love to have one document that is like,
yeah,
well.
I would like to have more work on nested parts content. And as I said, I had some slides prepared. Maybe it's fitting to talk about them now, maybe later.
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
I think we should talk about it now.
Okay.
That's okay.
Or anything else about this? So this clicker doesn't work.
No, it does work.
Does work?
Yeah.
This work. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about Mimi content format, and Mimi content is a big proposal, but I wanted to talk about the nested part inside the Mimi content, which is where the actual message is, like the markdown or HTML or whatever you want. It's inside the nested content. And first I will talk about Rohan's approach and how it's defined in the draft currently. And I will use this notation. Can I? Oh yeah, nice. This nested parts has a structure where you either have a single part or you have a multi-part containing multiple content elements. For example, we want to send this message where it's an image and some text alongside with the image. And the way we could send that with the Mimi content draft is you have a multi-part. That means we have multiple things inside this message and we want to process them all. And then we first have an inline image, which is an external part. It's stored on the server somewhere. And then we have a render part, which we render however the client wants. And it's marked down and it just says, look at this. And it's rendered like this. And I think that's the main way images can be sent and how it's envisioned. But you could also have internal references, which is this. Okay, we see the same image, but this time we use this content ID internal reference. And I talked to Rohan, we talked at previous IETFs about it. We want to have some kind of internal reference, I think, where you say, okay, we have this image, then a new line, and then the text, look at this. And the content ID 3 means you talk to this ID, which is just counting up that first. And yeah, that's another way to specify the same message. And I think it's a bit weird to have multiple ways. We should have some guidance about what the right way is to send messages so that clients can render them the same way, maybe. It feels weird to have multiple ways. And the problem with having internal references, or maybe let's compare them at first. No references, the first way, the application has more control over the rendering. It can decide it wants the full image and then the text. But when you specify it with an internal reference, you have all the control of Markdown. So for example, you can have a table, and inside the table you can have images, and inside an ordered list you can have images. And maybe we want that, maybe we don't. It's an open question. But if we want that, we need internal references. And if we don't want that, then we can give the application more control about how it renders the images. Otherwise, the sender has more control because it can link it in the Markdown. And yeah, no reference is easier to pass. You just go down. And with internal references, it's a lot more difficult because this content ID, what does it point to? Can it point to itself? Can it point to something above it? Can it point to a multi-part? And I have an example about this. This is a really weird example. You can try to envision what your client would display in this case. For example, here we have a Markdown text which references itself with an internal reference. And here we have one that references this choose one multipart, which references the first multipart again. And it's just a mess. And maybe we can find a simpler way to avoid these kind of parsing problems on a way in the grammar itself. So I have some proposals about this. Or maybe any comments so far about what I presented? Okay. Oh.
I think the reason why the two examples that you made are the same is because you chose to render them the same. There's no requirement to render them the same. I think even that it's very plausible that they will be rendered differently, because the Markdown thing will create a logical block, which is just something in the block, whereas the image could, for example, in your case, be rendered. I mean, in your example, you actually rendered the picture was with rounded corners, which is something you would probably not do for images directly put into the Markdown or HTML or whatever, because the Markdown or HTML decides how to render, whereas the rounded corners are designed to match exactly the design of your application. So one thing is I have content from the other side, and the other thing is I want to render an image and a text. It's two different things. So I think that is the main reason why you think they are the same, but they don't need to be.
Okay, so your argument is when I want to send this message, we don't use internal references, but only for special cases where we want to do some fancy things with Markdown, then we could use internal references.
I think internal references is when you want to enforce a specific layout from in the thing, whereas the other one is the simple let the receiving client decide how they lay out stuff.
Okay. Yeah, another comment. Okay.
Yeah, Moshtaba XMTP. I don't get the problem with internal referencing. Is it about only verifying the model or like the text or something else? If it's only about verifying, like, do we have like recursion, like internal referencing or referencing to each other or something else? What's the problem with it? I mean,
The problem is, how would you render this?
Yeah, writing the verifier for this, it could be hard, agree. But it, as Marvin mentioned, the use cases are vast for this.
Yes.
Like in enterprise messengers that we're using every day in our work. I mean, having this option would be nicer than the normal one that's used in like commercialized
my
messengers.
proposal is not to get rid of them, but to simplify how they can be used. I agree that we should use internal references.
Okay, thank you.
But I wanted to ask this question first because maybe there are other thoughts. Okay. This is mostly from the issue that was closed, but I had a longer discussion with some people about it. So the first proposal is to have every message be a Markdown message at its basis, and then we can reference attachments when we want to render them inline. And let me skip to the example about it. Every message looks like this, and you have references into an attachment section below. So this simplifies, for example, the choose one, because when you want to choose one, you just look at the language, for example, and okay, I want to have the German version. And then I render this, and then I look at the internal references, for example, one, and then I can choose one of these. This is a choose one too. And I want to choose the German image as well. And for the film, for the video, we only have an English version, so we pick that. So this way we can, so this is a way to have only internal references and no flat way. But as we discussed before, maybe we want to have normal references as well in the how did I call it? The left way, no references, easier to parse. Maybe it has rounded corners, that was the example. And here are the pros and cons. This way has a clear separation between messages and attachments. And attachments cannot reference each other, which gets rid of a whole class of problems. And on the other hand, you can't nest attachments, and maybe some applications need that. Rohan gave one example where you have a message containing a vCard, a contact, with which references an image. Is that something that anyone implements, email or something? Because I think vCards usually have an embedded image inside of it and cannot reference things outside of it. Rohan?
Yeah, I mean, as another example, I mean, I could have a calendar, you know, I could have a message that says, hey, everybody come and join my, you know, let's see if we can do this. Here are 3 different calendar, you know, calendar invites, like pick the one that you want, right? Think about polls. Inside of calendar images, calendar things, you can have vCards. Right? There's all sorts of nesting that is very natural that exists out in the real world. So, I mean, this just seems like a step backwards. And, you know, I've seen this implemented. I know that it works, and we've like some pretty, you know, some pretty solid test cases for testing weird things and like various attacks. So I don't see a problem with the system as it exists. And if we always require, so, and you know, we've already identified and mentioned in the comment thread these problems of having nested types. We don't have a complete description. So it's like we have something that doesn't do some things that are easy to describe that we might want to do. It doesn't have a complete description. And it has Markdown. I mean, maybe in your next slide, you're going to talk about how to make Markdown look less ugly in these kind of situations. But yeah, one of the reasons for Markdown, that there's a statement there in the current spec that says that you can render it as text. And if we render something like that as text, it's going to look really ugly.
Yeah, I think this goes a bit back to the problem. If we want to have a big renderer that can render anything like polls, and you can fully specify how to render polls, or if we want to have something more interoperable where you define how polls should work and then have it in the application itself.
So I think like this will not be that useful if we go down that path. So I think really the question here is like there's a trade-off between like limiting the flexibility that you give to the application to be able to render lots of different things, and like why would you do that? Like what's the benefit, and is that benefit worth it? Because otherwise, like why would we limit this? It's not about like enumerating every single use case for it and then trying to figure out how you could do it in an alternative way. Oh, you can embed the image in the vCard. It's like there's a million examples of how people might use this. And I think in general, we want this to be flexible enough that it can be used in this very wide variety of contexts. So if we were going to close down some of that flexibility, we'd have to establish a clear benefit that people agree on that we need. And I'm not clear on what that is, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to reply to one thing you said, which is, you know, that you wouldn't be interoperable. Well, I mean, it's implementable and it's tractable. What's in the document now. So I don't think there is no problem that we have to solve. It's like, if you want to say that there's something we can have that's better, then that's a reasonable thing to propose. But for it to be better, need to say why it's better, and like, as Alyssa said, regarding to like why we would want to reduce scope of what people would be able to do in the future.
What I don't really understand yet is, so we have this format which allows us to express, like, it's very expressive. You can express various features and vcards with embedded images and all that kind of stuff. But when, like, and I think that's what Timo meant just now, is where does the interoperability come in, right? If I'm getting a very complex Mimi content message and I don't really know how to present it to my user because it's a weird feature that I don't really support, that I've never seen before, but maybe the sending app has something nice that it wants to send me or show me or something. What I would imagine is that we have this really powerful constructor of content, and what might be helpful is having like predefined features and then be able to have predefined ways of how you construct a Mimi content to actually send an image or a vcard with an image. And then you have a list of things that you can actually do, and you can parse it and see, oh, is this one of the things in my list that I support or not? So yeah, I'm having trouble to understand, like, what am I meant to do with this, with the Mimi content message that I just don't understand and don't know how to render.
Yeah, it would be great to have. So Rohan's approach is great, has a lot of possibilities, and I would call it a syntax, a big syntax about how anything can be done. But maybe we need a grammar to give it a more structured approach. So, for example, when you send an image with a caption, what way should you use? What if there's different languages for the image and for the text?
So I think, sorry, Rowan May again. This is not about, so we can write an informational document about, hey, here's some good ways that you could go and generate some things. But the job of the specification is more about how does, in order to get good interoperability, you need to be able to render the contents that you receive correctly. The rules are straightforward. So we know what the semantics are for each of the parts, and how, regardless of how they're nested, we've come up with additional language, and you helped with that to come up with things to say, this is how you restrict various combinations of things that don't make sense, that don't have reasonable semantics. In terms of Conrad's question of like, well, like, what if I don't support vcard? The thing is that that's what the content negotiation format is for. If we're using this in the context of full Mimi, you would have in your group context a list of the media types that you support that are required, and if you put a vcard in there as a required element, then everybody needs to understand a vcard. And a content ID inside of a vcard, it already has a predefined meaning. So you know what the meaning of that is and how to render it, and how to render a vcard that contains something else. So it's all very sort of tight in what the renderer needs to do. And I think that the most compelling, like, immediate use case would be for polls. If somebody wants to use this for polls, they have a way to do this, but that we also have a way, as long as the poll is, the poll has to have a media type. If things don't support that media type, then they won't display it. And there's also language in this spec that describes when you can send something that is optional and that you don't support. And so in that case, you would just have to have a fallback to something like a plain text message or markdown message that says, hey, if you're getting this, like, go ahead and send some reactions to reply to this poll, for example.
Thank you. I think I would love to have more official examples on, for example, polls and the things you mentioned. I opened some issues about that before, but I think there's not enough interest to have it fully specified in Mimi itself. just my thoughts. It would be great to have interoperable advanced features in Mimi.
Marvin, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think not having something in Mimi content doesn't mean it is not in Mimi. Yeah, I think I have to. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I'm quickly looking through this as well. If the markdown looks too ugly, we could think about using a different version to reference things which looks better when you render them in plain text. And this could be useful with Rohan's main approach as well. This would be my other example, where what if you want not only Markdown, but also fallbacks to plain text or HTML, and you would pick that at the first level and then decide what attachments to use afterwards. And my main issue is the choose one, because I think Marvin posted an example on how he passed the choose one and how he selected the right path, but it doesn't include references. And when you reference images, for example, you want to choose images that have the language you want, and maybe you prefer to have the HTML page if it has the right languages, even if you're better at Markdown. So there's inline images, and this is what I'm using for inline images in Markdown.
Sorry, my question is, okay, so a reference, like that's just going to render as text. Image square bracket 1 square bracket, that's just going to render as text, right? So that doesn't have the semantics of a reference. It's just text.
You mean this?
No, one more up.
This is also a part of Markdown.
But that's not Markdown, that's plain text.
Right, but you could write this in Markdown as well, and it would be a link reference, which is a kind of reference as well, but
okay,
it would be a bit misused.
But the English plain, where do you put the image?
Okay, yeah, the assumption is you render this in plain text, and then afterwards you print all attachments and say
okay,
one.
But
and then,
so this isn't following. This is following a more, but there's a concrete algorithm that's in the document that can express these choices. This is coming up here and describing something at the microphone without a draft. That's not really a good way for us to go and decide on these things. So
the document only tells you how to do it at the lower level, not inside of Markdown. For example, inside of a table in Markdown, you can have internal references.
But it says for things that have links, Markdown, HTML, it says how to do this, right? It says for, if it doesn't say don't do this for plain text, then it should.
Yeah, I have some of the questions I talked about today. Maybe we want to have more discussions about any of these questions, but that's it for me.
Okay, so I think on the second one, it would be helpful if you could just propose the alternative, not just point out the issue with what's in the draft. Like if there's something you want to replace, like what are we replacing it?
Yeah, the replacement would be this kind of format where we don't have.
No, I mean not the example, like the actual set of steps that you want implementers to follow instead of what's in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If there's interest in this, I can formalize this. And
I mean, I think people need to see it in order to figure out if it's worth further discussion, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Maybe one more related question is, should clients be required to understand Markdown? This is a bit unclear in the current draft. It says client must support the Markdown content type, but it's not clear if it's enough to render the Markdown as plain text. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks. Protocol?
I have one more comment regarding content, because you raised a question around whether we are ready for working group last call, but then Timo jumped in. So I understand the desire that we should move at least one draft to working group last call. That's the preamble. I'm not sure it should be content. I mean, there are a number of issues, obviously. And the other thing is we don't have interop. We only have preliminary support in actual messengers. And as we started integrating it into a messenger, we discovered things that led to issues, etc. I'd expect more things to be discovered as we support more of it. So I'm expressing some concern that it's quite premature to move to working group last call.
So
Can I ask a question really quick? Actually, thank you for reminding us that we didn't finish that conversation. I kind of ask this all the time, but I'm curious, like how many people we have implementing it who are interested in interop. Okay. That's like twice as many as we've ever had. Just let's pat ourselves on the back. So yay. But I had the same thought before we left and came back to it. It would be great to do a round of that and hear from people about the issues they find. I think that would be a good preamble to a working group last call.
Is anybody waiting to finish implementing in order to have something to interop with?
I think it generally just takes time to integrate it into an actual messenger stack for entirely different reasons.
So I think I could probably set up some kind of maybe I could get some help from, I don't know, somebody who's done one of these before, but a test rig for some messages, and we could add more messages to the list. To the repo, add messages to test against.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should start interoping.
Okay.
Great. Well, you guys can self-organize, and if you need anything, if you need something to make that happen, like Tim and I can help. So.
Sorry, one quick comment. Wouldn't we need, in addition to the message, some sort of, and I'm not sure if that's already there. If it is, then I'm sorry. Some sort of description of what you would expect it to render or to appear in the user-facing thing, because that's what we want interop on, right? Is that already there? If that's so, I'm sorry, I missed it.
I think there are two categories of things which are interesting. One of them is what are the possible things ways that you could render a particular message? And those might depend on what on your specific details of your client, right? Because if you render Markdown as plain text, well, that's going to be pretty primitive. The other would be, what does a combination of messages that refer to each other, what does that, what are the semantics of that bundle of messages? And there, we don't want to prescribe what the rendering looks like, because I might have a UI that's on a phone that's like in the corner of a conferencing application. I'm going to say provide a lot less detail, or I could have like a desktop instant messaging client. So I think that's a good thing to work on. And I'm willing to start on it. I'm not willing to do it by myself. So please let me know who's willing to help.
Cool, thanks.
I just wanted to add that I think for the complicated nesting parts and so on, I think the only thing that we really kind of need as description of what needs to be rendered is just to know which exact part, like a leaf part, is to be rendered, given a specific context like language, supported MIME types, and so on. I think that is the thing that should be in the description, maybe for an example, but not any like concrete how to render.
Cool, thank you. Okay, Mimi protocol. I've lost track of time here.
It's okay, we're fine. I mean, we didn't have the whole 2 hours booked.
Okay. All right. So Mimi protocol changes since IETF 122. All right, ready for the ones that are controversial now? Okay, so the oldest PR here that I merged was the proxy download, or the thing that came after the proxy download endpoint, PR number 111. I'm going to discuss this in the next few slides. I also had I added an additional signature from the requester of a key package to make sure that their provider can't tamper with a key package request on its way to the hub. It's 112. As I said that I would in Bangkok, I changed the franking integrity to use a signature instead of an HMAC. This prevents an attack which Felix Linker identified, and I think Deirdre asked me about in the hallway once, which is effectively that colluding parties could, colluding malicious clients could overwhelm the report abuse system by sending a bunch of bogus but apparently valid messages. And let's see, I also have a PR that I merged that is for the hub to have an opportunity to staple new versions of invalidated pending proposals right away. There's a related PR that's open, and so we can discuss those two together. And then I did some fixes, some text related to salts. There was just a thing that was the name of the signature key and sign with label was missing, and I replaced that with the appropriate thing, and just fixed something in the CI. All right, ready for the fireworks? Here we go. Download proxy service. Okay, so what happens in messaging systems today? Clients upload assets, images, videos, attachments, whatever, somewhere for use by clients on that provider, other users of the same provider. If we did nothing, a client from another provider would just download an asset directly from the sender's provider. This is what this document said, this document made no sort of other claim to do anything about this. Actually, this document didn't even exist when this issue came up. This issue came up when I presented Mimi content the first time. DKG spoke up about this. This is the web bug. How do we solve this? Mimi protocol didn't even exist yet. So the problem is that this would reveal a lot of private information about the downloading client, like its IP address. And you'd be able to figure out, okay, yeah, this IP address keeps coming up on these, getting messages that are correlated with these other IP addresses. You can form a social graph, blah, blah, blah. So this PR describes how the client has three choices. It can do a direct HTTP download. It can, and maybe that's a reasonable thing to do, and maybe it does it because it's using, like some custom VPN or Tor or something else. Or maybe it knows that the target resource is on its own server or on it, is even on its own network. The second option is that it uses a simple to implement download proxy endpoint on the hub. This prevents the sender's, the uploader's provider from seeing its IP address. And okay, so it has it addresses a very, very specific privacy concern, but it introduces some other trade-offs. Finally, oblivious HTTP. And there's a diagram here on the right-hand side. So in this case, Bob, let's say Kathy uploads an asset to her provider C, and then she sends a message with this asset link. It gets fanned out. Bob decides Bob wants to fetch this. Bob uses an OHTTP wrapped request to an OHTTP relay on Bob's server provider B. And then a message gets sent from that relay to the OHTTP gateway, which is on the hub, and then a request gets sent to fetch that asset from the target resource, which is on provider C. So this is 3 options. The client is in control. So what information is leaked in each of these cases? So if you look here, in the direct download case, it leaks a lot of information to the asset provider, but it doesn't leak information to the downloading provider or the hub. If I use the download proxy option, this is the simplest mechanism that doesn't leak the IP address to the asset provider. But it does leave a fair amount of information along the way, including the target URL to the hub provider. Finally, the option for the client which provides the best privacy overall is to use OHTTP. So in this case, of course, the downloading provider probably already has the client's IP address and is aware of when it's online, so it would leak the client IP address in time of request. The hub provider, it gets the target URL and the downloading provider, but it doesn't know the specific user on the downloading provider. So it knows if this were, a very small provider, it might be able to have very good information about who this is. But on a large provider, this would kind of get buried in the noise. It'd be, hiding in plain sight. And finally, the asset provider gets just the target URL, the name of the hub provider, and the time of access. And the time of access with caching, that could be less valuable. Any questions about this before we go into the last slide about this topic?
Just to refresh, the point of raising the download proxy option is because not everyone's going to implement OHTTP. Why are we including the download proxy option?
Yes, so I proposed only doing HTTP at the previous IETF, and people said this was too much. It was too big of a hammer, like not everybody would want to implement it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Okay.
Yeah, so the implementers who are here, well, actually we've asked about implementers of Mimi content. Mimi protocol would be a little different, but that'd be all 2 of us.
Yeah, I was interested in if OHTTP can be streamed, if it can be used to stream assets. Maybe you have a 5 GB video file. I see thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah, there may be some text that I need to add here to make it more possible, but I need to get with people who know better how to make sure that's possible. But the protocol was designed to be able to do that.
Okay, and maybe other implications for the speed and latency of everything.
Yeah, the goal would be to be able to make sure that all of these, and like most of the open source implementations can do that. You just need to not screw up the definition.
Just put a finer point on the thumbs up plus hand wave. OHTTP as defined in its RFC is just 1 unit. You don't stream it across all the, I guess there's underlying HTTP streaming stuff. There is an extension to that is, I think, it's somewhere in the post working group process right now. It's reasonably final, that does explicit streaming over OHTTP. So it's there. It's there. It's just not like totally done.
Go ahead, Tim.
Rowan, could you please go back 1 slide?
This one?
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So what's illustrated here is that the hub provider is the OHTTP gateway. Okay, can you flip forward 1? So I just want to understand, is there an assumption or requirement that the OHTTP relay be one of the Mimi providers involved in the room?
Sorry, that the OHTTP relay be one of the providers?
I think I'm getting my possibly getting my OHTTP terms mixed up, but like
the
the gateway
hub is the gateway, and the downloading provider is the relay. So,
okay, why can't the relay be like some completely further entity if it's not any of the providers? I think possibly you get better privacy properties
because
that way.
of
Is the
this
assumption, but
slide.
no. Oh, okay, I'll let you speak to that then.
So we already kind of talked about these first, some of this here, but the very bottom two bullets. The idea would be that you would pair this with an attachment policy. So the attachment policy in a room has a specific host for each provider represented in the room. You could also do this by out-of-band configuration. But the important thing here is that for both the download proxy and OHTTP, the hub would be checking to make sure that the target URI is someplace that is supposed to have storage on behalf of one of its peer providers. And this would be to avoid the hub becoming an open proxy. We get to balance all kinds of things here. And yeah, go ahead, Raphael. Richard, you're out of the queue, right? You're done.
Yeah, thanks for that effort. Just to link that to the conversation we had last time, which was a bit more polarized in the sense that on one hand, we said for everything else, the hub is always in control of managing everything, including enforcing policy, etc. But then your argument was at the time that large providers, might not consent to hosting large amounts of data of users that are not their own, which is also a valid point. So is this solution essentially a way to cover both? Meaning, obviously, the latter part is clearly there, but using a download proxy, does that mean that the hub is in control as well of the attachments?
Okay, so this is all about download. So if you want clients to upload things to a specific provider, the idea would be to take advantage of this attachment policy where I have a little table here. And so the idea would be to say, all right, I am a.com and I use some provider. Now it could be a cloud provider, it could be in fact that it's storage for provider a.hub.net. That because of an arrangement with the hub that there is a sort of an area of storage that's allocated for things that come from a particular provider, or it could be a bucket that's shared among multiple providers. The way that I want to make this is that that the right thing happens on the download side, regardless of where the thing gets uploaded, and that we can have an extension that allows you to upload it to numport, wherever, to put it on a different provider if that's what we want to do. And we would need something like, I don't know, privacy pass token, or we would need something in order to make that safe to be able to upload files on some other provider, because we don't have a native authentication binding with some arbitrary other provider usually.
And we wouldn't go through the hub for that?
Well, I mean, if the hub was the thing that was offering that would be it, right?
Right. Now, just because you mentioned privacy pass, like there is this idea of a contract existing between all of the interoperating partners here. So why couldn't the hub then delegate stuff?
Well, I mean, we're talking about adding extra functionality, right? So I think that what you have described is something that we should be able to do, but I think it should be optional.
Yeah, sure. But that was exactly what I wanted to ascertain. If optionally it could be done. But
sure.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it should, like, I don't think there's anything in the download on these three slides that require you to do something new once you've gotten a document uploaded to, say, your own hub, to your hub instead of to your local provider.
Okay. Thank you.
So I want to ask a general question here, which is, what do people think of the idea that the client kind of has three choices? Does that seem like a reasonable trade-off? Okay, a couple of thumbs ups. All right, and then Marvin, do you want to say something now about that?
It was not directly related. I think it's about this table. It's a little bit confusing to me right now in the download proxy case, because the download proxy is the endpoint at the hub provider, right?
Yeah.
So how do we have the client provider, which I think is what you mean with downloading provider, involved here at all?
To forward the request from the client to the hub provider. Otherwise, I suppose we could leave it, the download proxy endpoint could be open on the hub and the client could access it directly.
Oh, so it's basically two HTTP requests after each other. So I do an HTTP request to my provider and then they do an HTTP request to the hub.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how the whole protocol works. That's how the whole protocol works.
Yeah.
I think you're just trying to be comprehensive about all the data, even though the issue there's a lot of completely non-controversial data exchanges happening in this diagram.
Yeah, sure. No, I was just wondering if it is meant to be supported that the client directly downloads from the hub as a proxy, which would be basically then 4 options in total.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for a large provider about whether they'd be comfortable doing this with, even if this was locked down to only to its peer providers. But if I had, if I only had 5 peer providers that provided assets, maybe that would be fine. But if I had, hundreds, then maybe I'd want to have a little bit more. I'm not sure.
I don't think I got that. So my question is basically, I have a client. The client can directly request from the asset provider, of course. That's the first option. We can do the OHTTP stuff through both basically all providers involved. And then there's the download proxy, which I understand is an endpoint provided by the hub, which my client, the receiving client provider will fetch from, and then you have 2 HTTP gets after each other. Like I get from my server, and my server gets from the hub, and the hub gets from the asset provider. So it's actually 3 gets. And yeah, my question would be, why, or would we want to allow the client to fetch from the hub? And if we don't, how does the hub know or guarantee that the downloading provider is in fact the downloading provider, if it's just a regular GET request to a download proxy endpoint?
Yeah, there would be no way for the hub provider to know, absent some, token auth token, like delegated auth token or something like that. I think it would really be, up to the hub to decide if they wanted to allow a connection directly from arbitrary clients, or whether they want to make sure that it comes through one of their existing providers. All right.
So
okay.
Just time check for you. We have 35 minutes left.
Okay.
Eric was going to get 20, and you also have AV metadata that maybe we might have to skip, but you might want to prioritize.
Yeah. So these were I have here a list, and it's also in the draft, of the things that would be like mandatory to implement in order to make this work. So basically, the OHTTP gateway, that's what the hub does. That would be mandatory to implement with should deploy. OHTTP relay, which is on the client provider, would be should implement, should deploy. And the download proxy would be mandatory to implement on the hub. And then the client would be able to, it would be able to decide how to do things. So that's my straw man. please think about it. For now, it's in the document. Please send issues, PRs, et cetera, on some specifics. But I'd like to kind of, this seems like the only middle way that seems, one of the few parts of a middle way that seemed accessible for this issue. Okay. I think these are pretty straightforward, so I'd invite people to have a look later. I just wrapped put a signature key in the initial key material request and a credential. So when a key material request comes back, it would be impossible for their own provider to active attack and replace that with a key package from something else. I detail the franking integrity calculation. I discussed this in Bangkok, so this is not new, but I encourage people to have a look at it. The thing that is, you should be aware of is that there is a franking signature key that's in the group context before the hub is able to do franking with this integrity calculation. Okay, I had some PRs about pending proposals. So the PR, this just adds basically a list of pending proposals here with hub accepted times that could be included along with the group info and the ratchet tree. So if you do have valid pending self-remove and app data update proposals, which are valid in external commits, you can take these and then you can take the proposal references and you can include them in your external proposal or your external commit. And then there's also this, which is if there are other types of pending proposals like, GCE or removal or something like that. This provides a way for a hub to say, hey, I got a new commit and it invalidated some proposals that the hub had sent for policy enforcement. It can go and staple the new versions of those proposals immediately to the commit. We may not need this if we end up with no situations under which we have to go and replace pending proposals from the hub side. Oh yeah, and also I have a draft May MLS external commit pending proposals document I will be discussing in MLS. So we'll see. Okay, skimming through, we discussed this. There are some that are marked to do or chore, which just require me to do just work, and chore. This is just me turning the crank. We already discussed the download proxy. We discussed pending proposals. We discussed the Mimi content franking struct separator issue. So I just need to make the appropriate changes here. I had something about timestamp integrity. This is really an architecture issue and not a protocol issue because protocol doesn't deal with history. So I'll create an issue of an architecture and close this. We had a very old issue related to tracking arbitrary state. I have one slide for that, which okay, this one. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to close this and create a new one for creating arbitrary state that is members only, that needs to be encrypted. If somebody, Conrad, Raphael, who already is doing stuff with where we want to be able to have keys that are available for encrypting members only state, it would be great if we had some common examples that we could include in a PR for this, or at least that we could pop in an issue so that it's there, so that we want to add it, we can. Okay. So still missing versioning scheme, a knock scheme. One question is whether we want, as this starts getting more mature, are we going to be getting more additions to minimum metadata? Are there going to be other documents that we can reference that have more stuff about minimal metadata? So please let me know what the plan is there. That's aspirational, but still doesn't mean I'm not going to try. All right, room policy. Part of this time is going to be for Timo. Okay, there are no changes since the last IETF. There are 6 issues. And there is, I got a couple slides on these. And we discussed the download proxy thing. This just needs to be made consistent. Okay, these are for Timo. I'll let you come back with your own slides here in a second. Let me just get to these other ones real quick. Oh no, these are all for you. Okay, your slides or your presentation.
Yeah, I implemented part of room policy because we want to use it in our project. And I ran into this situation where I was interested in if we could model this kind of a room. And I was wondering if we want to be able to model this room, and if so, how. So for example, we want a room where there's regular, on the right, you can see there's outsiders, people not in the room, there's band users, regular users, admins, and the owner. But for now, only important are regular users and the admin. And we want to give the admin some abilities. For example, we want to have an admin that can make other users admin as well. That's common in messengers. And maybe the admin, was there a comment? No? Okay. Maybe the admin wants at some point to demote themselves. Hey, I don't have the time anymore. I don't want to administer this room anymore. So I'm stepping back. But we don't want the admin to demote other admins. So we want the admin to have the ability to do some action to themselves that they cannot do to others. We moving the role from admin to regular. And as far as I could tell, this was not possible with the current draft because there's this authorized role changes list. Okay. This is authorized role changes list, and it says this transition is allowed, this transition is not allowed. And if we want to allow the transition from admin to regular, then it will apply to all users with the handicap that there's some capabilities which regulate it. Maybe this is what you want to mention? No? Okay. Yeah, in the proposal, there's some, do I have this here? There's some capabilities, for example, can change user role, can remove self. But these are very limiting because they only apply to some special roles, for example, band or outsider, or it applies to all roles, for example, can change own role. And this does not allow, for example, this does not allow this kind of room where we want to can change own role and can change other role, but not allow the admin to demote other admins.
Okay, so for this first example, I don't have like a strong feeling about whether we should be able to, whether I think that this is useful or not, but I'm really curious if this has been an issue that's come up in any other messenger before that you can actually have an admin demote themselves, but not demote other admins.
It's like this on Matrix for different reasons, but this is how it works on Matrix.
Okay. Is this a feature that people do you have customer feedback that people like the feature?
No, not personally.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if this should be something that we want to model. Maybe a provider would be interested in this.
I can't personally see that. I don't see a use case where this would be useful, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be useful. And the split role change would be the way to do it. This would be a totally reasonable way to do it if we want to do it.
yeah, the solution would be to split up this array of authorized role changes, which specifies all allowed role transitions, into two. For example, this one authorized role changes that applies to all other users, and a separate list of self role changes, a list of transitions that a user is allowed to make on themselves. And this would allow us to create this kind of room. And yeah, is there enough interest in this to make this relatively small change?
The Matrix people are co-authors of this document, so maybe we could hear from them. Yeah, I mean, obviously they use a different scheme to accomplish the same things, but I'm recalling the original conversations about like much blood, sweat, and tears spent on this. So
yeah, Matrix is like this because it's a decentralized state resolution, and when two admins say they demote each other, you run into a conflict about who wins this fight. So they do not allow demoting other admins. But maybe there's a user experience reason too. And the other question I have is, in the current draft, there's a list of capabilities which are additionally checked on some role transitions. For example, can change user role and can remove self. And it's not clear to me why we need these capabilities if it's already fully modeled by authorized role changes. And I think Rohan has a comment about this somewhere. Was developed as a secondary check. It works, and it could potentially be more granular. Can remove participant, but not can kick. It's not clear to me what the difference would be in this case. Maybe you can say something about this, because if it's already fully modeled by authorized role changes, we do not need all these capabilities.
Yeah, it's similarly not motivated compared, like the previous example, right? The fact that being able to remove a participant or being able to kick but not remove a participant. I don't know any system that allows that.
What is the difference? Can you explain again?
If you go to the next slide, this was you. There's a difference between whether it makes a difference whether a user stays in the participant list after they're kicked.
Okay, I think this is about bans, not kicking and removing,
Right.
but I remember the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, you had it in an issue. So in this slide, if there's a difference between if we think that someone would want to be able to kick someone out, kick out all their clients, but not remove them from the participant list, then we would want to have this kind of granularity. I don't know.
On the admin issue, demoting, could you just have it so that you can't, there always has to be one admin. So if there are like 3 admins, someone wants to demote themselves, demote someone else, they could do that up until the point where there's only one admin left, and then you can't.
Yeah, is that an issue? We have on the role definitions, we already have a list of minimum required users that have a role. And if that's violated, then we ignore all these checks and we say, no, that change is not possible because we need to have a minimum of one owner or one admin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to be more clear about if we want to have this kind of feature and then have a few capabilities, but I think we can remove a lot of them that are a bit unclear and limit us to those.
So just a concrete proposal, I would say that if we think that we want to be a little bit more generous in what we would like to be able to allow, then I think we should split the 2 fields from the previous slide, and we should keep the capabilities separate from the authorized role changes and self role changes. If we want to go for something as narrow as possible, then I would say we should make sure that that every capability we want to implement can be expressed just by authorized role change, and then not have a separate self role change. So those both seem sort of self-consistent. One is like hey, I think this might come in handy in the future. And the other is, let's get something that we know is actually required in a bunch of circumstances, and just make sure that it's, at least it does that.
I see.
Okay, is
Yeah.
there a place to continue this? We need to move on to Eric. So we're gonna have to stop there, I think. It sounds like this is like,
Yeah,
needs
okay.
more discussion anyway, right?
Something to think about is how we can stop information on bans and how long a ban lasts. And we don't have a way to encode that currently.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you. It's good to see a lot of people I haven't seen for quite a while, and I hope to be coming out to Montreal. Don't panic. I have no intention of going through 18 slides today. There's just a lot of backup slides. So why are we here? As we know, Mimi relies on a trusted hub. We've got end-to-end encryption, so the hub can't see what's going on, but the hub itself is an attack surface. And even though we've got end-to-end encryption, a compromised hub can still, reorder messages and drop messages. We have things like franking, which an honest hub can use to help clients with ordering messages. But being the paranoid person I am, we don't trust anybody. This is just an example of message dropping. Not going to walk through it, but the reason I've got this particular example is it's kind of obvious how this could be an issue. This message dropping or targeted things could be an issue for, say, censorship or something like that, nation state attacking an individual. But it could also be an issue for enterprise use cases, like interoperating between Slack and Adobe Connect, and that opening up the opportunity for mayhem by compromising the hub. Our threat model, it's a nation state actor or an insider threat, that they can compromise the hub. We also consider that the hub can do traffic analysis to detect if the clients are trying to do some sort of checking. And hat tip to Rohan, I was thinking it was a wild corner case, but actually you could set things up, an attacker could set things up where they have both compromised a hub and the hub and a client, which means they kind of do have an opportunity to defeat end-to-end encryption, even if it's after the message goes through. But remember, the hub can do things to, for example, prefer sending messages to its clients before it sends forwards messages on to following systems. So what are we addressing here? Funky stuff happening with timestamps, that messages might be selectively delayed, and also isolated views, and that's the message dropping. So what we built, and this is where Harditya is at least on the first version of this draft. This was his master's thesis, is that we're proposing a client-driven audit layer. So using Merkle tree proofs so we can detect the behavior but not have that much burden on the clients. One of the goals we had was not modifying the hub, because if we did something that relied on the hub doing something, we've kind of violated our first principle of the threat model. So we're not saying that we're going to do more trust in the hub, or maybe have other servers that aren't magically trusted. We're saying, we're not going to touch that. We were looking to have minimal communication overhead, and a thing of, obviously we can revisit if this work is of interest. But our goal was not to change Mimi or to change MLS. Basically, the high level flow, the clients have their ordered list of messages and timestamps. That's just what they do as a client. But then they also randomly generate and broadcast Merkle proofs. And the implementation we did was to kind of attach them to regular messages that are going back and forth. Because again, remember, the hub can do traffic analysis. So if it sees every 10 minutes or 40 messages or something like that, there's this set a message that goes out and then all come back around the same time. It can probably figure out that that's a proof round. When a client receives a proof, it can verify it against their own message list. And clearly, if there's a mismatch, then they know something's gone wrong. Actually, I basically just went through that. I am not going to go through the math, but the point is it's probabilistic. We don't do this proof on every message because that's kind of a heavy burden on the network and the servers. But we basically calculated, in a sense, what's the right amount of time to wait in order to statistically catch the hub doing something untoward. These are actual real simulations. And by real simulations, I mean, we wrote a Mimi implementation in Rust. Thank you, Raphael, for OpenMLS. Built it on top of that. And then we had our clients talking to each other. And then since it was our server, we could tweak it to do some attacks. And as an example, we have these two parameters, alpha and beta. So alpha is what's the probability that the client's going to request a proof, again, probabilistic, because we're trying to avoid traffic analysis. And beta, which is how likely is the hub to do an attack. So for example, if the malicious hub attacks every message, it's probably going to get outed pretty quick. Likewise, if the clients are not testing very often, they're going to get hit. And actually, Rohan, if it's okay, I've actually just got one more slide. So, all right, cool. Or one more meaningful slide. So here's the meaningful slide, because Rohan quite rightly said, what about franking? The word franking doesn't appear in the draft. And that's kind of, well, I wouldn't say necessarily an oops on our part. Franking was kind of an idea when we started this work. So here's kind of, and this is also where you can rip me apart. You can say, well, wait a minute, Eric, you totally missed, and we're open for that. Franking, basically, the main thing is a sender can't deny sending a message to, having sent a message to a particular group. Because in MLS, we know that the sender can't deny sending the message, but MLS doesn't have the concept of the rooms. So what does it do? It adds the accepted timestamp. So now we could do ordering as long as we trusted the hub and the sender URI to the message. And here, the client might notice if the timestamp looked wonky. For AppAct, what that does is it confirms that a message range has been received. Sort of near the end of the epoch, one of the clients is going to submit an MLS proposal and say, hey, I've seen this range of messages. And so when that gets broadcast out at commit time, again, the clients will say, well, wait a minute, I haven't seen all those messages, or I've seen more messages. So they'll know again that the state's kind of wonky. In the audit layer, already explained how it did that. So with franking, that might catch selective dropping and reordering. But again, we're depending on the hub being honest. With APAC, there's kind of a bit of luck going on because any of the clients can do the proposal, and you might just not be lucky. The client doing the proposal might not have seen an anomaly. The client who does the commit, in a sense, they need to see the right proposal because presumably more than one client might be doing a proposal. And it's also saying that, in fact, both the client doing the proposal and the client doing the commit are honest. With the audit layer, well, on the one hand, we will catch a evil hub, and we've got kind of a feature and a bug. A feature is if you don't care about risk, then you don't need to do it at all. If it's like it's an enterprise, I own everything, I'm not going to worry about an insider, you don't need to do it. It's also kind of a bug because if we do want to be able to go out there and advertise Mimi has got all these properties, we can deal with nation state actors and insiders, then you kind of do need to have the clients implement it because obviously a client isn't going to know necessarily what environment it's being deployed in. So I'm going to pause here. Rohan, please.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Eric. I was just going to bring up I thought it would be interesting in the next version of this draft to talk about the, like one of the properties of APAC is that it uses an app ephemeral proposal. And so the difference between using application messages and proposals in terms of the final result ending up, with a proposal, the final result ends up baked into the group state. And like, I would just say, like, please consider a couple of pros and cons about maybe sending them as app ephemeral messages or sending some of them as application messages and some of them as app ephemerals, and just kind of try a few of those options on for size.
That's right. And before I get to Raphael, I will go to the next slide. And we're thinking alike here because I actually like the property of using MLS state because that is a way of making sure everybody sees everything. This, working out a consensus mechanism, that's a thing to think about. But no, that's definitely a good idea. Raphael.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the presentation. I have to apologize. I have to say that I'm not super familiar, not as familiar as Rohan with the draft. But maybe some context that came up now during the talk. So first of all, APAC was only designed very early on to mimic what the Signal protocol is capable of doing. And it was even part of the base draft at some point, and then we moved to the extensions document. So it's not comprehensive, and it never intended to be. It was really only just so we could say, MLS is not really worse than the Signal protocol in that respect. So it's not surprising that, you find that it's not good enough. And yeah, so something that I've heard from a lot of implementers of the Signal protocol is that message distribution from an engineering standpoint is really complicated, and it's really hard to give any sort of guarantee, particularly about ordering. So the hard part is already to deliver the message from A to B, and like ordering is really a bonus, particularly in large deployments. And that is why the Signal protocol has some tolerance there as well if messages get reordered. So I think in the Signal protocol, it's 2 points. The the hash ratcheting can skip up to, I think, 2,000 messages in case they don't get delivered. And the Diffie-Hellman ratcheting, I think that the default is like 5 messages that can be out of order, like a window of 5 messages. It's completely arbitrary, but just to indicate that that exists. And that was also a guiding principle for MLS, where we have this requirement that handshake messages have to be ordered, and that is already a complicated requirement. And then we said application messages should not have that requirement. Applications can, of course, enforce this if they want to on the delivery service, but by design, we have the same kind of flexibility that we have for the Signal protocol. So all of this means that it is to be expected that some messages are not going to be ordered, not because the hub is malicious, but simply because the systems are not good enough. Now having something that detects these glitches essentially in the delivery might lead to a lot of false positives if just applied to a system that was never designed with these specific constraints in mind. So it's not me saying that, you know, we shouldn't try, and this might be the best attempt at it. I'm just trying to provide some context that it's not super straightforward in general, I think.
Yeah, no, and you know, we certainly knew that MLS, in fact, is very explicit. We're not going to even try to deliver things in order. I've got a thought that could make everyone happy, and I want to hear from Conrad first, and then I'll loop back and then come back up and say, yeah, that's great, or no, you're nuts.
Okay, first of all, I think this is great work. I think it's nice to have something like this. And because I really like it and I'd like to see it used, is that if this is meant to be used, it should probably work with message deletion as well. So one thing is like individual messages that just would drop out of the tree, and then if you, at least in my mind, it should work with messages that are completely purged from the device, so that even if someone inspects my device locally, they cannot find a trace that I actually received a message there and that I deleted it. It's maybe a bit strict of a requirement. I don't know if you can accommodate it or if you want to accommodate it at some point. And the other thing is disappearing messages. So you have that in most messengers, I think, these days, where you say, I want my messages to be retained for 4 weeks, and then they're gone after 4 weeks, and then you have to make sure that everyone's on the same time and has deleted the same messages to make sure the Merkle tree aligns and that kind of stuff. So I don't have a solution ready, of course, but I just wanted to say, like, this you might run into this, and message deletion is certainly something I would expect all kind of messaging apps to use and to support at some point, also in the context of Mimi. But yeah, thanks for the work.
Good. Well, thank you, Conrad. And I do have 2 master students on the call who are always looking for interesting, hard problems to solve. So what, you think I'm going to do the work? What I'm kind of hearing, well, I'm hearing a couple of things. Being a work group chair way too many times, I am not going to ask for this to be adopted as a work group item yet, because it's way too early. Yeah, I see the big smile there from Melissa. It does sound like it's worth doing another draft. It also sounds like, given Raphael's comments, that maybe keeping this at the application layer, so it really definitely would be a thing that only if your application needs or indication of ordering that you would do it. Otherwise, if you're like replacing Signal or interoperating with Signal, you just say, hey, it's never going to happen anyway, so just turn it off. What does that sound like for folks in the room there?
Any quick reactions? We're going to try to do 1 minute on AV metadata before we wrap as well. So. maybe
Hearing no comments.
put a link to the list, but yeah, I think
That's
think
right.
people
Yeah, we'll
have
take it to the list. And Rohan, I feel for you. Anyway, thank you all very much, and glad to be back in the saddle.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right. Got to
1
walk
minute,
in one
Rowan.
slide.
Only take people 1 minute over.
Okay. So I'd already kind of written something up in a paper notebook for how to represent some interesting properties, AV metadata for audio, video, audio, things like aspect ratios, dimensions, alt text, preview images, durations for videos, preview images, and Timo posted an issue, and I was like, oh yeah, let me just go write an internet draft with that stuff that I wrote down in my little notebook, and I put it in there. So here it is. Timo specifically asked for a blur hash. I didn't really know what those were until he pointed me. So I just kind of gave an example of a blur hash, and you can't really tell because of the color, but it's right there. Or I could have put it on the preview image or something else. But so anybody have any comment, Marvin? And is this something I should keep revving? Obviously not going to be a working group item for any length of time until we finish like at least three documents, but
yeah, please don't use blur hash because it lacks proper standardization. I mean, there's like 5 implementations. You can use the implementation or be whatever, but it's not a standard. If you want to use something easy, is just, I don't know, base 64 or encode, or not even, because we have actually binary. Just put in a small size image. Just put the PNG with just like 4.4 pixels or something like that, and it works as well. It might be a little bit larger, but at least it's some reasonable standardized thing.
Okay. Is anybody, so who think they would actually use this if it were around? Okay, we got as many people as we had in Mimi content, so that's great.
Yeah, and maybe you can share
Thanks.
it. I guess you maybe did share it on the list, but it would be good to get feedback from people who have dealt with similar issue in messaging since time immemorial.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, thanks all. Really productive session.
Enjoy your brownies.